Okay, it's 1 o'clock. Today is April 26th. This is a Prescott City Council study session, and I do want to recognize Supervisor Craig Brown in attendance today. Welcome, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Got a pretty full house here, so let's move through these issues. Can you have roll call, please?
Mayor Good.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rusing.
Here.
Councilman Montoya.
Here.
Councilman Moore.
Here.
Councilman Sischka. Will be here in a minute, I assume. And Councilman Tenney.
Here.
And the record will reflect that Councilwoman Hall is excused from the meeting, and I will note when Councilman Sischka arrives.
Very well. So we will start with the item A, 3A on the presentation from the Protect Group.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. We're really grateful to be here with you this afternoon. I was commenting to some of our supporters behind me when we were outside that it's kind of an overwhelming day and very momentous. You giving us, the citizens, an opportunity to talk about an issue, to talk about our campaign. So thank you so much for that. I'm Patrick Grady. I'm the board president of the Yavapai Climate Change Coalition and the chair of the Protect Campaign Steering Committee. And with me this afternoon is Kaya Hayes, our campaign coordinator, who will be a fellow presenter this afternoon. So as you know, the Protect campaign is nonpartisan and it's grassroots. And the interesting thing is that the campaign is focused on one single goal: to secure public and political support for the implementation of a Quad Cities climate risk assessment. Before we move on to look more closely at the Protect campaign, I'm going to take this opportunity, so thank you in advance, to make a few personal comments. This conversation today is about hope. Hope that we continue to find common ground on this issue. Hope that we will continue to expand our current models of collaboration and partnership in this community, because we do recognize there's some very important work going on, particularly among the numerous groups involved in wildfire mitigation, wildfire prevention. Protect partners and allies can increase resources for all of these efforts and increase citizen engagement. Hope that our shared values to protect and care for the earth, as well as for the forests, our water, the air, the ecosystem, that these values lead us to a shared purpose and a common agenda that we can all support and rally behind. And we hope that we will always be guided by the joys and the laughter, as well as the voices of concern and even anxiety of our children, who will inherit this earth, our children and our grandchildren. This particular sentiment has been ever present in many of our campaign gatherings over these past many months. And with two lovely granddaughters up in Flagstaff, my own volunteer activism is driven by that love and hope for their future. So as you know, the Protect campaign is focused on 4 impacts: hotter temperatures, long-term drought, flooding events, and of course, wildfires. Those impacts facing our community and our region are here now. Witness the Crooks Fire, for example, or the Raphael Fire last year, or the hotter temperatures of last summer, or the prolonged drought with really no end in sight, a drought that impacts the health of our forests, which is in our own very real backyard, and our water resources. You've seen our Protect campaign material. Our accomplishments in our update in your council packet highlighted the degree of the outreach that we've undertaken, not only throughout the region, but also in expanding our ally base in this work. You've heard speakers at Call to the Public in December and January. We thank you for that. You have read our letters to the editor. This morning, we delivered postcards to each of you from citizens across our community. And let me add, all of these campaign activities could not have happened without an amazing cadre of volunteers, just some of whom you see today behind me. It is this level of engagement, candidly, that inspires us all. And now, turning to you, the mayor and city council, we do recognize that you have been listening. So appreciative of that. We're deeply grateful to this city council. I want to call it new city council, but it's been a few months now, for your leadership in placing the Quad Cities Climate Risk Assessment proposal into your 2022 strategic plan. We are grateful for you not only scheduling this study session, but actually for having it right in the middle of Earth Week. The timing of that couldn't have proven more wonderful, actually. And we also want to thank you for the Earth Day and Earth Week proclamation issued a couple of weeks ago. It set the tone for the week. The proclamation closes with these words: to encourage all members of our community to engage in education and dialogue around the restoration of the earth and the environment. And we had a wonderful Earth Day celebration on Cortez Street on Saturday, and we have more to come this week. So now I'm going to turn it over for the next portion to my fellow colleague, Kaya Hayes.
Thanks, Patrick, and thank you, Mayor and Council. Before I begin, I just wanted to give a brief recap for those who might not be familiar with the fact that PROTECT is not only literal, but also an acronym for Planning for the Resilience of Our Towns, Environment, Climate, and Tourism. And so hopefully that can help to frame the rest of our presentation into kind of a broader context. We want to start some things off with a short video that details the events of the 2018 Camp Fire in Paradise, California. This tragedy was especially striking to us in the Protect campaign as we learned just how similar the Quad Cities area was to this region, both geographically and environmentally. And as a consultant to our own fire department said a couple of years ago at the city council meeting, it's not a question of if, but when we experience a catastrophic wildfire. And even now, as the rhythms of our daily lives are filtered through the smoke of the Crooks Fire, just 10 miles away, it's beginning to feel not as hypothetical, quite a bit more concrete. So we hope that this video will help to foster some dialogue and conversation. So this video packs a punch. It's pretty real, and for folks who have had experience with similar fire events, whether here in Arizona or elsewhere, it's easy to see how things can quickly get out of control. And so our intent with showing this video is not to sow fear, actually, but instead we hope it can inspire us all to be ever vigilant and to start thinking about how we can reach out in new and innovative ways in both existing and new partnerships, and recognize just how important it is that we're able to make informed, empowered decisions about how we build a safer future for our communities. And so we see that there are benefits to climate action planning, and we see them as two sides of a coin, effectively. On one side, we have this need for public and environmental health and safety. We need to know how and when to act to avoid repeating this kind of tragedy so that this didn't happen in vain and we can learn from it. Preparedness and planning allow us to strengthen the existing systems, to support all of the folks fighting right now, to keep our communities safe, and to fill the holes that are missing in our preparation and planning to ensure that nobody has fallen through the cracks. But it's so much more than that. It's about On the other side of this coin, the opportunity to innovate, to invest in policies and infrastructure that enhance the assets our community already has, to find creative ways to develop new ones. The tech and aerospace industry have long had Prescott's eye, and a cutting-edge, forward-thinking approach to community planning, economic planning, and safety, that's what puts this town on the map for those companies and those industries. And a cohesive planning and a track record of investing in the future like this is something that gives the Quad Cities as a whole a really competitive edge. And so to make this kind of action possible, we feel that the Quad Cities needs to take the important first step of implementing a climate risk assessment for the region. This is a professional assessment. It provides a baseline of data for the region. It identifies the scope and risk level of vulnerable areas that might benefit from additional planning and investment. And upon completion, the report, as well as its appended list of best practice recommendations, serve as a really substantial foundation for a community action plan, where city, citizen, and regional inputs can be blended together to tailor an approach to our future that makes a lot of sense to our community, to our values, and to the things that we see are important to that resilient and safe future. And so I'm going to hand it off to Patrick to talk about how we might get that done.
So these past several months, the Protect campaign has not just simply been creating awareness and identifying the problem, but we have brought a solution to you this afternoon. We would like now to introduce you via Zoom, virtually, Dr. Allison Meadow of the University of Arizona. She's an associate research professor with the Office of Societal Impact and a co-investigator with CLIMAS. Some of you will remember that CLIMAS was the research organization that did the climate profile for Sedona and the Verde Valley. Dr. Meadow will provide a brief overview of CLIMAS and their mission, describe their commitment to work with our region to undertake the Quad Cities Climate Risk Assessment, and share some exciting news. So, Dr. Meadow.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for including me in this study session. I'm excited to be here and start a conversation with Prescott and with the Quad Cities area. As Patrick said, I'm Allison Meadow. I'm an associate research professor at University of Arizona. I work with several of the climate programs at U of A, one of which is CLIMAS, the Climate Assessment for the Southwest. CLIMAS is based at University of Arizona. We have as a partner New Mexico State University because we cover the Arizona and New Mexico region. Our mission is to link the science about climate variability and climate change with decision making in our New Mexico region by collaborating and engaging with decision makers at all levels, so community members, natural resource managers. We've worked with emergency managers, policymakers, anybody who needs the information about climate variability and climate change in this region in order to inform their decisions and their plans and their actions in search of opportunities to strengthen community health, ecosystem health, and really plan for robust and resilient communities going forward. So we really like to focus very much on this collaborative aspect of our work. It's not just us telling folks what to do. We want this to be a partnership in which all knowledge is combined together in search of solutions. CLIMAS is funded by the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. We are a part of a network of 11 similar programs around the country. We are about to have our big program, our big network is about to change, and we will have a new name. We will be Climate Adaptation Partnerships. Still within NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. CLIMAS is one of the oldest of these climate adaptation partnerships. We have actually been around since 1998 and have been in operation ever since then. We just submitted our proposal for our next 5 years of funding. So we're hoping that will cover us between up through 2027. We are an interdisciplinary team of 14 researchers that we include climatologists, economists, epidemiologists, and other public health researchers, and social scientists. We feel that our broad base of knowledge really helps us understand and answer the wide range of concerns and questions that communities in our region have about the impacts of climate variability, things like drought, and climate change, those bigger changes that we're observing now. The Community Climate Profiles project within CLIMAS is an effort to help communities access climate data that's really specific to their area that can inform climate change adaptation plans and other long-term planning efforts. One of the things we recognized through our work was that access to what we like to call decision scale climate data, whatever decision, whatever area that you're interested in, whatever the scale of those decisions, we sort of call that decision scale climate data, that is explained clearly and concisely. It was really a barrier to many communities in the region, particularly smaller communities. So this was an opportunity for us to help to fill that one particular gap. So over the last 5 years, we have worked with 8 different communities and organizations in Arizona and New Mexico to produce these profile reports. You've seen the one that we did with Sedona. And we really try to tailor them to community questions and priorities. So we take the data and we do a lot of conversations to understand what are your priorities? What kinds of questions can we answer for you to the best of our ability? So we summarize long-term historic climate data to really provide a baseline for each area. We discuss current climate trends, what we're experiencing and living through right now, and then provide description of possible future climate conditions. So using some of the very high-tech climate modeling that tells us a lot about how the globe as a whole is changing, we're able to downscale that and look at particular areas and say, okay, this is how we expect this particular region to change. We always include some summaries of likely climate impacts. You've heard, some of the things that we know the region is likely to experience. As we get hotter and drier, that means that risks of forest fire go up. As we get hotter and drier, we have water resources issues and drying, stream drying and river drying. So we try to describe that and make the link between some of the climatic changes and what you're likely to be seeing on the ground. As was mentioned, we like to include a summary of some possible adaptation strategies in there to get that conversation going. Here's something I really want to stress. The plans, any adaptation strategy, the plans, the actions need to come from within communities. So that needs to be driven by you, by community members. It's really important because you are the ones who are going to live with the impacts and with the decisions that come from your plan. So while we can provide some guidance, provide some resources and ideas, we feel really strongly that the actual adaptation planning effort needs to be a community-driven effort, however you want to define community. So if that's Prescott specific or Quad Cities, that's a decision that you need to make. But we can be here to provide just some support and guidance in that. But a community-based and engaged plan is a far better plan. The communities that we have worked with so far have used these profile reports, sometimes as direct inputs into climate change adaptation plans. So taking the science and saying, this is the likely impacts, here's how we want to be able to respond to those. As inputs into other community planning efforts. So anything where you need to know what's coming 5, 10, 20, 30 years down the line, even if it's not an adaptation plan specific, this kind of profile can just provide that long-term perspective. It's also very useful just for simply jump conversations with, in the community about what kinds of changes are we seeing, what are we worried about, and getting that work going. And we also have had communities use it specifically in funding requests when they have known that they needed, fill out a grant application, something like that, having some of this information to demonstrate, yep, we know what's coming. This is what we're likely facing, and this is what we need additional resources to tackle. We are nearing the end of our 5-year CLEMAS funding cycle, but we've identified some funds that we can use to generate a profiles report for Prescott and the Quad Cities region. That means that there would be no cost to the communities for this report because our funding from NOAA would cover this. This is something that NOAA has already invested in. But we would be asking for some cooperation and participation from you all because it is really important that we hear your questions and priorities so that we're able to respond to that and get feedback on the format and content of the report because we want it to be useful to you. So having fresh eyes read what we've written, make sure that we're answering your questions well so that you can use it in whatever the next step is for Prescott. That's really important to us. I think that is sort of my summary. We just met with our climate profiles team yesterday, so this is something that we can start working on over the summer, and we're ready to dive in when you are. And usually, it's not an instant process. It's something that we're going to have some back and forth, and it's going to take a little bit of time, but it's something that we're committed to doing. For the region, because we think it's really important, and we think it's as the previous speaker said, doing this kind of long-term planning is a really big commitment and investment in the long-term health and resilience of your communities. And if that's something that we can help with, we would be very pleased to do so. So thank you so much for inviting me today. And I hope that this is the first of several conversations throughout this process. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Meadows.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Meadows, for that wonderful overview and really exciting news. Just to recap, this assessment with the commitment of the CLEMAS crew is completely funded by NOAA funding, and therefore a really fantastic opportunity to take that first step. And so we're hopeful that the Protect campaign, along with your leadership in planning and talking about priorities for this community, has laid the foundation for undertaking this Quad Cities assessment this summer. We strongly recommend that the Prescott City Council consider supporting not only the assessment, but the participation in a working group that represents city staff from participating communities as well as citizen representatives so that we can really extract the full value of this opportunity. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Kaya. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Dr. Meadow. You did mention the fact that there were 8 communities that currently have gone through an assessment. So I understand that's Sedona, Tempe, Mesa, Phoenix, Tucson, Yuma County, and Flagstaff. That's 7. So is there another one?
Those were not ones. Those were not. We have not worked with all of those. So there, different communities have worked with different research groups. So
And some of those that you mentioned have actually proceeded on to climate action plans. And in some case, folks, I can think of some communities in Utah that are focused more on renewable energy plans. So it varies from community to community.
So how many and what communities have actually done this particular climate assessment?
In addition to Sedona and the Verde Valley, I'll let Dr. Meadow respond to some of the other ones that she's worked with. Flagstaff also did one actually in 2012, and that served as their foundation for doing a climate action plan in 2018. Sedona did theirs in 2019, and that led to their creation of a climate action plan in 2021.
Can you give me some examples of what adaptation strategies were actually designed and implemented?
Allison, I don't know if you want to answer that question, but I know that in there were actually, in the climate action plan of Flagstaff, a whole slew of activities that have been undertaken over the last several years. Sedona, in particular, has worked on adding more solar to their municipal facilities. I know, as an example, that Prescott Valley is even considering doing a municipal energy audit. So energy audits are usually a typical outcome where they want to see what kind of cost savings can occur by focusing on what municipalities' impact is on our carbon footprint. So in addition to that, electric vehicles is another good example where Sedona has begun to purchase vehicles. I assume that Flagstaff has done the same. Sedona has now created a green fleet plan to ultimately electrify their entire municipal fleet. So the range of work varies. There's different groups, for example, in the Flagstaff area that are working on issues perhaps around wildfires, but also about just forest health because of the impact, as Allison pointed out, the impact of the drought and hotter temperatures on forest health. So those are a handful of kind of smaller examples. Some communities, for example, are looking at greenhouse gas emissions and the impact of air pollution in their own community and trying to reduce that particular impact. As an example, Sedona recently created a shuttle system to their trail system in order to cut down on the number of visitors that are just riding from trail site to trail site in their cars. So we can provide you with a more detailed summary of a number of communities, particularly in the Southwest and the West, that are undertaking a wide range of climate actions.
Thank you, Patrick. Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Patrick, I had questions. I think your presentation answered quite a lot of them. I guess when I think about this study that Climas is talking about, there's two questions I have. I guess the first question is, it sounds like this type of report would require other stakeholders to come to the table to provide insight into what they would be looking for. And I guess my question to you is, aside from perhaps other municipalities in the area, Prescott Valley, Chino Valley, or even the Yavapai County that might come as a stakeholder, and your group as a stakeholder, have you identified other stakeholders that might be able to provide interesting insights into the type of information they would be trying to see?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. We've spoken with the new fire chief on this particular subject, and he's expressed an interest in certain data that he thinks would be helpful to probably what he's going to talk about in the next few minutes. But also we've been continuing to try to maintain contact with the Yavapai County Office of Emergency Management. With COVID, that became difficult, and also they've had quite a change of personnel over the last 2 or 3 years. And so their new director has actually only been on board now since April, but we're actually meeting with her in the next couple of weeks. County health departments can also play an important role in this, and I know that Maricopa County Health Department, for an example, has a relationship with the issues of climate change within their community, and what are those health impacts that are impacted particularly by hotter temperatures. So in addition to some of those allies, working with Powwick, for example, the mayor had a wonderful column just a few weeks ago on the role that Powwick has played in our community.
For those at home, will you give them the benefit of explaining what Powwick is for those who might not know?
Can I ask the mayor to do that? No. So Prescott Area Urban Wildlands Interface Commission. That's good I didn't slip. Usually I say interfaith, but Interfaith Commission. And so Pawick, I am probably not as familiar with it as the mayor is, but Pawick has done an amazing job in terms of reaching out to communities and neighborhoods and neighborhood associations and creating Firewise communities and doing training and education around that. And I think candidly, the Protect campaign can help expand that particular effort.
So I have a second question for you, and this one is a little bit more pointed perhaps, but I guess one of the things that I've learned is anytime someone says that they're going to do something for you for free, particularly when it's the federal government, the thing that I wonder is how are they going to try and tie my hands, or what are they going to demand of me as a result? And so I guess my question is, from a due diligence perspective of the city becoming part of some sort of program like this or being a stakeholder at the table, it sounds like really your ask of us is just to be a stakeholder within this process, if I'm understanding it correctly. And so I guess my question is,
Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead. If you're ready to answer my question, you can.
Zoom lag. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I do want to clarify because I definitely hear your question and I hear your concern. What we view as our role in this small effort that we can provide is we have recognized that this access to some of this information and some of the science that is out there about the kinds of changes that we can expect in Arizona and New Mexico in particular is more difficult to come by than we would like. So where we can help is closing some of that gap and making sure that data, the information is accessible. That's where our role ends. We need your input because we want to make sure that we're answering the questions that you have. But CLEMAS cannot lead a planning process for you. Partly because that's not part of our funding or availability. So you have no obligation to do anything that we say. That is a community decision. That would be something that Prescott, along with your partners in the Quad Cities area, would need to take on the planning and the decisions about what the community's future looks like. So there's no that we would not be expecting anything in that way. That's sort of our philosophy is we're here to provide some support and some advice, and if we can provide some resources in terms of getting some of the necessary information, that's a role that we can definitely play. But we hand it off in terms of decisions because we don't live there. It's not our decisions. We recognize that the most successful planning efforts come from within a community. There needs to be buy-in and support from within the community, and that's not something that we could possibly do. So we want to be able to jumpstart this process by providing some of this information. So when we ask, about stakeholder input, what we're asking about is, relay your questions to us. If we sent a draft of something that we've written to Protect or to the council or anybody else that might be on a working group, we'd hope that you would review it to make sure that we're answering things clearly, that we have addressed your concerns to the best of our ability. There are always questions out there that are not possible to answer, but we're going to try really hard. So I hope that answers that. We want to be here as a resource, but in no way taking control of a planning process. We recognize that is not our role.
Thank you, Dr. Meadow. Mayor Pro Tem Rusing.
Thank you. To me, it sounds like this assessment will be a very important tool, and we can use it to plan for the future, to be prepared for climate change. And also, it sounds like it might be important to help us recognize where we can have some cost savings involved, too. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions or concerns? Thank you very much. I appreciate your presentation, Patrick. And
You have a public
we have
comment?
some public comment.
Tom Rusing?
Good Good afternoon, and I want to thank Patrick and Kaya for a great presentation for a very important topic for all of us that live in the region. And as chairman of Save the Dells, I want to just say that Save the Dells strongly endorses and supports the efforts of the Protect campaign, and it not only deals, as they said, with fire issues, but with our water future as well. And so I think that fits very well into Save the Dells' greater mission, and so we fully support it, and we encourage not only Prescott, but the surrounding communities and the county to join in this first important step. Thank you.
That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Dr. Rusing, and welcome back from Ukraine. I encourage you to go over there and volunteer to provide your medical expertise. That was terrific. So thank you for your presentations. We'll move on now to the next study session item 3B, presentation and discussion regarding community risk reduction and lessons learned from the 2002 Indian Fire.
Good afternoon, members of council. Ogredora Fire Chief. When I prepared this presentation, the Crooks Fire had just started, and I think it would be wise for us to start this presentation talking about what's currently going on. The incident commander of the fire was kind enough to spare some time and give us an update. I have some packets that I'll hand out, but without further ado, I'll introduce Rocky Opliger, who is the incident commander of Incident Team 4, currently managing the incident, and he always introduces himself as having only 49 years of firefighting experience. So with that,
thank you very much. Thank you, Chief. Thank you. Mayor, City Council, it's an absolute pleasure and honor to be here today, representing all the agencies, and most important, the cooperation that I've seen. It's been absolutely amazing since our team, California Interagency Team 4, came in to manage the fire. The fire started, I believe, on Monday the 18th, and it was pretty it's not very normal to get a late call on a Monday to try to mobilize the team. Usually the work rest guidelines prevents that. But we were notified late Monday to do an in-briefing on Tuesday, and that's pretty quick for folks to travel all the way on my team from Northern California. But we were mobilized that morning. We actually did the in-brief here at the fire center on Tuesday, and quickly with the organization that was placed and just the relationships, it was really easy to take those folks and fold them to our team to help manage the incident. And I tell you right off the get, that's what the success was, is where we are today on it, which is a difficult fire, and laid the foundation. Our team, California Team 4, is one of 16 federal national incident management teams in the country. 2 of those teams are specifically tied to the Southwest, and both of those were deployed at the time in New Mexico. Since our team was deployed, there's been 2 additional teams that have been mobilized into the Southwest region. That includes one from the Pacific Northwest and one from the southern area, many of those from Florida and those states, managing other fires that are within the zone. The fire currently, as our last, was at 6,454 acres, around 16% containment. We know last night that we had some pretty good growth with the wind. We took a pretty good IR flight this morning that gave us information showing that it was probably closer to 7,800 acres. But because of the excellent work, we've actually gained additional containment around 20%. Now the fires remain active today. We got some of the latest intel around 11, 12 o'clock that will post the latest update on what the fire is and additional containment. Now, most of that containment is really the efforts were put initially on the north end of the fire. Certainly, when you take a look at the effects to Potato Patch and Walker and Breezy Point, and the work that went in to save the communication sites at Mount Union, all the way to Mount Davis. And that's where really a lot of the effort took place initially to minimize those impacts. Today, they were actually have handline all the way around Mount Davis, working down the east side, all the way to Muscow Peak and all the way to Yankee Doodle. And they've tied that into, I believe it's Ass Creek, and we've got a good plan to hold that whole east end going down towards the bottom, or the 82 road. The issue right now seems to be the area just below Lookout Mountain. We did have last night spots that crossed over the 81 road. It's still been difficult to get folks in there. That's country that we can't really work at nighttime. And so we minimize our resources at our night because because they also don't have the support of aviation to assist them, and it's just difficult country to see. And our highest priority, besides obviously public safety, is always our firefighter emergency responder safety. So the efforts continue today. What I want to say is just amazing to have an air tanker base so close to your fire, and those cooperations to allow the contracts, whatever, to allow that aircraft. We're having 15-minute turnaround. The state has really supported us, the geographical area, and not restricting us on aircraft. We basically are the #1 incident in getting all the aircraft we have, including the rotor wing. And for me, having done it as many years and seeing the fire, and Chief Pemlock, we're close friends, we were division chiefs together for a number of years, gave the presentation on the campfire, and having worked on the campfire, knowing what you guys face and what we face throughout the United States. That same county, Butte County, in 2020, had the North Fire that I was the incident commander on, and we had the single largest run ever recorded in history of 217,000 acres, 27 miles in 6 hours. And while we did all the evacuations and folks didn't leave, there were 18 fatalities. And when we talk about all the folks that have been impacted that are evacuated now, I can't express the thanks, and certainly for evacuating. You know, it's been proven historically and documented, most of the fatalities occur from people that wait till the last minute to evacuate. Most of the accidents and injuries and fatalities to emergency responders happens trying to save those people. Last year on the Dixie Fire, we gave warning. We had 40, 50-mile-an-hour winds going into Greenville. When the fire came in, we eventually lost 75% of the community, including all the businesses. And folks that didn't evacuate, we were literally throwing folks on fire engines, law enforcement vehicles, and we were fortunate not to have a single incident. So our law enforcement components and the relationships, both from the federal, the state, the local fire department, all the law enforcement agents, the cooperators, is amazing. We put the difficulties on our law enforcement folks. I can say I can always put a fire shirt, and people know the firefighters, you know, they're good people, and they put the law enforcement people, they think about the last ticket they got. And those folks are the ones that really initiate the evacuations, and the relationship here is amazing. They've updated us. We always have the difficult task of what we feel is going to be the impacts of where the fire and what potentially the fire will do. But they're the ones that have to initiate that evacuations and to make the notifications to get folks out. So we'll continue those efforts. I know we do have a community meeting coming up on Thursday to give us the latest update. We're not out of the weeds at all. We've still got some difficult alignments where the fire wants to get in some areas that have no previous history of fire. And remembering that when we put the firefighters in there, we're putting in there to not put them at risk. And we allow them to have that decision-making space to say whether they can take that task that's been delegated to them to initiate. So I always finish with the praise to the young men and women having done that, spent 20 years on hot chat crews, and went a lot of time in this country in my younger days. And it's just a pleasure to see the folks that we work with and have the leadership that you have from all the agencies working together, certainly on the incidents and fires that I've been on throughout the country and outside the country in Australia and Canada and Mexico. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. Really appreciate this. And actually, it's probably good right now to talk about relationships. This is pretty unique. Granted, there's some timing involved here, but I'm going to introduce some members of the U.S. Forest Service, the incident commander of this incident. This is unique to our community, and it demonstrates the strong relationships that have been developed. And it's also a national relationship. When I came in from Boulder, that's actually the first time I met Rocky Opliger in October at the Calwood Fire. And so it's not the first time we've seen each other. It was a familiar face in the crowd, and so we had a little bit of a relationship going there already. So that's a really good thing. All right, with that said, let me introduce a couple of folks before I get into this. With us as well is Sarah Claussen and Jeff Andrews from the U.S. Forest Service. I also have Mike King from the Forest Service, retired. And then Dr. Claussen is here. He's one of our community members who owns a residence that was directly impacted by the Indian Fire. Now, that being said, community risk reduction is in this slide. And before I get into this part of the presentation, I do want to make sure that I emphasize that component of what I want to talk about today. Yes, we're going to be covering the facts of the Indian Fire for sure. However, I also want to take a look at what's going on today and what we should be doing looking forward. And community risk reduction is really what I want to have an engaged dialogue with this council about. True community risk reduction in the fire service, while it has been around for a while, when you talk to a firefighter about community risk reduction, usually they think it involves a code book. And that is a part of community risk reduction. But true academic and classical risk reduction is more out of the realm of epidemiology. And I don't mean to get too academic here, but I think it's important for us all as a community to organize our responses into pre-incident actions, incident actions, and post-incident actions. So for instance, in the event of a wildfire here in Prescott, we have been leaders already nationally in pre-incident mitigation. Now that's not to say that we don't have a lot of work left to do. We do. The presentations we've seen today, some of the experiences that Rocky Obliger just imparted to you indicate that wildfire is a significant threat, and it is a significant issue in this community. As your fire chief, it is absolutely within the top 3 issues that I have to deal with, and I look at it through the lens of pre-incident, incident, and post-incident actions. So, with that said, let's go ahead and start talking a little bit about the Indian fire. We've covered this a little bit. Like I said, we had that. Go ahead and keep going. All right, so facts of the fire. The fire started on May 15th, 2002, and at that time it was the most significant fire impacting our area in over 100 years. We've already said superlatives in wildfire currently are sort of the message of the day. I don't want to be an alarmist at all, but usually we do size things up with things that happen around us. Suffice to say we have a high-risk environment that we're in, but that goes without saying. In that fire, 5 homes were destroyed, along with about 1,300 acres of vegetation. So a significant fire by any stretch of the imagination, especially the fact that it was close to town. So anytime we have homes and lives threatened, it becomes a more significant event. During that event, approximately 1,500 people were evacuated, and 2,000 homes were directly threatened. The fire was contained within 5 days and cost, at that time, approximately $3 million. On the response side, we learned some lessons that day. First of all, we learned the benefit of aggressive fuel reduction. Prior to the fire, there were several fuel breaks and brush breaks that were put in place just outside of that part of our community, and that did help us significantly when the fire came to slow the fire and the injury release rates down to a place where the firefighters could then intervene with more direct attack. Another one is that the quick initial attack by response partners was also significant in this event. Initial attack in the wildland arena is simply the initial arriving resources trying to put a knock on the fire as quick as you can. So for instance, today we are staffing a severity brush patrol here at Prescott Fire, both in regards to the fire going on just over the hill, but also because of the weather conditions. As a fire department, we always want to make sure that we get quickly around these incidents, and if we can, then to establish an incident command structure that can further contain that fire. So quick initial attack was definitely important in this event. And then finally, interagency coordination with all of the partners, law, emergency management, county, public works. Those, once again, were proven, and they continue to be proven today as we speak on this particular incident. Next slide. This is the final perimeter, and you can see the relationship to Quartz Mountain right at the top left of the fire line there. It was definitely, in some people's eyes, a lucky break for us. Now, I would say, and Dr. Claussen and I had a brief conversation here before the meeting, I would say, yes, there was some luck involved, but luck favors the prepared. There is no doubt that this community had done a lot of things ahead of time that was done right, was done in a timely fashion, and done with strategy to make sure that that luck favored us that day. And I would contend that we need to continue down that road. Next slide. Greater lessons learned here. With the memorable Julia Childs, any disaster is a learning process. Funding is definitely an important aspect of this community risk reduction approach. Now, please don't mistake that I'm, as your fire chief here, asking for money during the work study session. That is not the point here. What I'm saying is how we spend that money and where that money comes from cannot just come from a single source. Nothing in wildfire response, in risk mitigation that we're dealing with here in Prescott can come from a single source, including us as your SMEs on fire response. There are things that we cannot do that are outside either our jurisdiction, our bound of possibility, or our bound of capability, and that is exactly where those partnerships come in. Homeowners Association asking for grant money, the federal side with the Forest Service aggressively mitigating the forest. Sarah Claussen just informed me the other day that the Forest Service has gotten a $28 million grant to help mitigate the risk in the Prescott National Forest, and I'm sure she would be more than willing to answer any questions that you might have regarding that. But it's funding that is targeted at an overall risk reduction strategy. Interagency cooperation, we've already talked about that. I hadn't talked about private contractors. I think in this community, private-public partnerships are a very good thing for us to leverage in a creative way. And then obviously, the fact that we need to know our risk on a constant basis. We have a geographic risk, and now we have also a weather-based risk with drought going on that are combining to increase that level. And so we need to make sure that our efforts are commensurate with that level of risk. And that may mean that in certain places, we dispatch resources differently than we used to. The way that we send the wildfire response 10 years ago probably should be re-examined and look a little different today, especially if we have red flag days. We should send more resources on the initial attack and not wait for the first incident commander to say, boy, this is a really big one. You know, predictable is preventable. We know that these things are going on, so upstaffing appropriately is also something we need to do. And then finally, I'm a big believer in the logic model for strategic planning, and in that, short-term, medium-term, and long-term strategies can be implemented comprehensively. Because especially for us, a general fund fire department, again, like I said, the impact of any dollars you give us is also limited, and I need to make sure that all of our outcomes are measured not just in what did I do in this last fiscal year, but what can I leverage with the community partnerships that we have to maximize the benefit of those resources comprehensively in the short, medium, and long term. One of the things that I, as your fire chief, will need to continuously do is to say, we have a wildfire risk. And that may seem a little bit interesting, but we know that once this smoke plume clears, the sunny skies return, and wildfire sort of drifts back into the community's mind, it's my job to make sure that we continuously push, even in the winter months, what we need to do, because the actions that we take as a fire department will have 5, 10, 15, and 20-year implications. It's not just about the next emergency response, because in this case in wildfire, most likely when we do have a wildfire, it's not just Prescott Fire that's going to be fighting that fire as we see today. So, next slide. We've already gotten you the Crooks Fire update, so we can go past that. As I mentioned, we have some representatives in the audience to talk a little bit more about the Indian Fire. As you can imagine, this is the first time I've learned about the Indian Fire as well, coming into this community just recently. And so I think it's probably best at this point that the community members, as well as the Forest Service representatives that are here, can answer any questions and maybe round out pieces of the data that I didn't give you in terms of the Indian Fire itself. With that, questions before we turn it over to some of these folks?
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, I have a couple questions. I emailed you a few questions prior to this meeting. I asked you about best practices that other communities in the Southwest are using, and you called out our lack of ability to staff a Type 3 management team. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. Just as important as quick initial attack is, it is also important that local resources have the ability to establish an incident command presence at what's called the Type 3 incident management level. Now, that Type 3 is obviously a lot of levels below what the Type 1 team that's currently in here, but it's so critical because it starts building things like planning, logistics, finance sectors, more appropriate incident command, qualified resources to be on the line to direct the resources on the fire. And my vision is that we are able to do that here in this community in the first 30 to 60 minutes. And currently, that is somewhat of a gap for us. We, as Prescott Fire, need to elevate our game just a little bit. That takes a lot of time, exposure on other fires. It takes learning. It takes task books to be completed. And those are not just tools in the ground. We have a lot of tools in the ground, but what we need is folks that are able to direct those tools and folks that are able to support those people directing that effort. And I think in this community, we could do a really good job by leveraging both fire department resources, regional fire department resources, resources within the county, the other departments in the city to be able to establish that so that when an incident management team of a higher caliber comes in, it's a smooth transition, and hopefully even with that Type 3 team, we can reduce the number of times we have to call for help from the outside.
Sure. No, that sounds great. And then the second question I have for you, I can't help but notice that Protect is here on the same day that you're here to do your presentation about this issue, and I know some natural tie-ins, and I wonder what your thoughts are on some of the presentation materials that they had, or specifically about that report that was talked about with NOAA. Do you view that as a resource that would be useful to leverage?
Absolutely. I think any resources and any data that we can have, remember I said strategic planning I think is really important. And in that strategic planning effort, looking at a comprehensive community risk assessment I think is important. Let the data speak. The data is going to have to inform our efforts as a fire department and as a community as to what we want to do. I have a little bit of a family connection too. My sister happens to be a climate scientist for NOAA, actually directs a lot of the people in Boulder. That just happens to be completely unrelated. Yeah, I'm the slacker.
It's all coming together now, Chief.
I'm the slacker in the family, to be clear. So I didn't have any idea. Maybe she was doing some work behind the scenes. But that being said, I hear those concerns. Now, from the fire department perspective, I do want to emphasize one thing. We have a place in this, but we are not the final be-all, end-all message. It is overall the community as a whole that has to carry this with various pieces of the community coming together. We are definitely willing to be an active component of that in our risk reduction strategy, but that's not where it's going to end.
Well, and I would imagine that this would involve a wide scope from the entire city, including looking at things like community development, public works. There's a lot of different stakeholders even within the city that would.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your answers to my questions, Chief.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I just would like to say that our new chief has certainly hit the ground running. And and also concerning the Indian fire, Tony Shaka was such a key player.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, he couldn't be here today because he's on a vacation, apparently. And another point I'd like to make is the concept of fire season. I mean, traditionally, it was in the summer. But now, as obvious, illustrated, November 8th was when the Camp Fire erupted in the town of Paradise. And then you mentioned the Cowboy Fire, that was in October. Now we have the Crooks Fire, that's in April. So I think we have to realize that the tunnel fire, you know, it's our fire season's going to be year-round, pretty much. Thank you.
Absolutely true.
Councilman Shishka.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, you're from Boulder, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about the communities that burned around Boulder?
Absolutely.
How fire prepared they were? What were the things that you ran into that you might not be running into here? Can you give me an idea of that?
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, you are from Boulder, and I always jokingly say, don't hold that against me. But obviously, a great community and impacted by wildfire, very similar to the one that we enjoy and love so much here. So the most recent event in Boulder was a Marshall Fire that happened on December 30th. It started in city open space and burned 1,000 homes in two communities, Louisville and Superior. Just before that, we had the Calwood fire that Rocky and I met on, and that was a fire that started in the foothills and had an extraordinarily rapid fire growth from the foothills all the way into what we call the flats there. Very surprising fire behavior, too. Now, the reason why I frame both of those incidents is because I think the lesson for us here in Prescott is that the planning efforts that Boulder Fire had done at that time was contained to city limits. It really was about great evacuation maps, awesome pre-planning, good fuels reduction with city-owned open space. Well, there was this guy called Murphy, and neither one of those fires happened to impact anything on city limits. The best analogy that I can use to the Marshall Fire, it's as if a fire impacted Prescott Valley and burned across the Ross and TJ Maxx parking lot and then caught Granville on fire behind it. So that's sort of, if you put that in context, anything that the city of Boulder did in that incident had nothing to do with those two wildfire events. And so the lesson that I think we can apply here is regionalization. We can do all that we can within city limits, but more than likely those events are going to pick where they want to be, not where we've planned for them to be. And so we need to be ready for that. The other thing that I think is really important there is that the partnership in terms of leveraging smart policy and smart regulation, I think, is very, very important. Simply saying a law is going to prevent something does nothing. Really, it's individual responsibility, and the mayor and I had a great chance to talk about this on his radio show. It is individual homeowner responsibility at the end of the day, taking smart mitigation measures, smart preparation measures that is going to help communities in the long term survive these incidents. And that's not just about your property, that's about making sure you're insured properly, that's making sure you're informed properly, and that's making sure, for instance, you're signed up for emergency alerts. It is vitally important, and the emergency right now, while we have been able to leverage this opportunity into some public information messages, it's a constant public information issue for us to make sure that our community and our community members are informed and taking individually responsible actions.
Were those communities fire prepared?
So Boulder is, however, Louisville and Superior, not at the level that we're used to here. And again, it's a suburban community approximately 10 miles from the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. And so there's a lot of things going on in those communities, and I can tell you nobody at the time thought that those communities would see that significant of a fire loss. So they're not fire-wise in the manner that we've come accustomed to, and I would definitely say those are lessons that we need to spread regionally. Just because you're not living up of Copper Basin doesn't mean this is not something you should be interested in as a homeowner and shouldn't be doing.
Were those incorporated communities?
So they were. One was protected by a fire protection district. The other one was protected by a larger authority model. Both of them are home rule cities. Both Superior and Louisville have their own councils, and they work with those two fire protection districts and authority models to do their fire suppression. So it is definitely an interlaced, intergovernmental situation.
Okay, so were they equipped with fire hydrants, things like that?
Absolutely.
Those communities?
Yeah, in that case, very similar to the campfire, every firefighter that was there that would recount later on said the tactics and the strategy that I had in my mind if I ever faced something like this got thrown out in the first 5 minutes of the incidents, and we had to learn anew. So yes, there were fire hydrants there, but for instance, the Superior pump station was impacted by fire, and they started losing water pressure in the municipal water supply. So, those are things that you've got to, get ready for and think outside of the box, to use a cliche.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Do you have any public comment?
Do Michael King?
Any questions to any other partnerships? No? Okay. I'm going to wear my hat.
Thank you,
Sorry,
Mike.
I'm out of uniform. Most people know me in this room, and those that don't, I like to introduce myself. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody instead of the bum which I am. I know Steve put in for that part and didn't get it, somebody else did. I'm a storyteller, I'm a historian, I'm a guide downtown on the historical walking tours. Those are my avocations, but my vocation was public service. It all started when I was a Cub Scout, and they said, do a good turn daily. I'm going to give you a context for the things that the chief talked about, and even the questions that you brought up, Steve. It is 1897. And this town and its residents and the people sitting at this dais, your predecessors, were confounded by the lack of a dependable water supply for this town. And your city engineer, Mr. Fisher, wrote up a plan about diverting Aspen Creek into Potts Creek, which they changed the name of probably in the 60s because pot was about it, marijuana. It's now Butte Creek. Anyway, we're going to dam up Potts Creek and divert Aspen Creek in there. We're going to have a reservoir, and that's going to be Prescott's water supply. And they needed an expert opinion. They got the city engineer from LA came by. The issue was it was on public land. There was no such thing as Forest Service then. It was GLO public land. They petitioned the General Land Office in April 1898 to have some land set aside so that Prescott could have a healthy watershed. It had been abused by logging, mining, grazing, homesteading, squatting. The land does not, it looks better right now than it's ever looked. But nonetheless, this council, this GLO agent wired back to his contacts in Washington. It took a week. May 10th, 1898. The Prescott Forest Reserve was established for watershed protection. That's your next item at 3 o'clock. But nonetheless, and we are named the Prescott National Forest. There's 154 national forests in the country. They're named after people, places, and geographic points. We're the only national forest named after a village or a city. And the partnership started in 1898 on May 10th. When I got my pin right here, my city pin, given by a former mayor, I've known every one of you guys sitting up there. Sooner or later, there'll be a Kathy up there, but who knows? But nonetheless, I've known you all for the 23 years. The logo on this city pin is Thumb Butte. It's a partnership that goes back a long time. Now, what do we have? We have Powwick, we've got all of the things, and the lessons learned is we were prepared for the Indian fire. We plan, we prepare, we share resources. 2 weeks before that fire, we did a basin drill. We had one of those in the last month, didn't we, Chief? Yeah. We play together, we practice together, we don't care about our jurisdictions and we wear different uniforms, but it's all about us. That's why we're recognized as leaders in how we deal with urban interface issues and how we end it. Was Rocky still here? Rocky, when he did his first news release and talked to the public, he said he just enjoys such a great cooperative atmosphere. That didn't come in one day. That came with 100 years of people working together. So some of the lessons learned that I have, this old man standing in front of you, is about being good neighbors. About being good neighbors, respecting each other's jurisdictions, but at the same time, it's all about us. We do this because it's good for the community, good for the region. We cooperate, we're boundaryless. We put hot shots. I don't know if with Mr. Andrews, were you the hot shot guy when we went into Hokhagon and some of these places and Yakashpa? Yeah, we put hot shots in residential areas. We put air tankers in residential areas in your city limits. This is where we live. This is our town. We love it. That's me talking. Okay, now, you talked about something about money. They're not asking for money, but you know what? We get money because people see the credibility that comes out of the money we spend. Hazardous fuel reduction. Crew 7 was here doing and chipping people's neighborhoods and helping people out with defensible space. 20 years ago, how many communities did we have? I don't know, Chief, or some of our others. We probably had about 4 or 5 defensible fire-wise communities. We got one of the highest per capitas in the nation. I think there's probably almost 30 or maybe more. 44. See, I'm out of it. That's an old man here, out of touch. But what I'm saying is we build credibility because we know how to play together, and our education efforts, our POWIC efforts, our fire-wise, our hazardous fuels reductions, our education. I think we got Earth Day, but we also have some fire-wise messages built into that, I think, is in some of that. And the volunteers. Whether they're the Protect people or the sheriff's posses that are out there working and being, making a contribution. One of the other things is we have, I'm over my 3 minutes, sorry, is we have a culture of cooperation. This is a new chief, and I've known all the chiefs in the 23 years by their front names and their dogs' names. Okay? That's the kind of, and even some mayors too. But that's the kind of relationship that we have. Our firefighters know each other, and they spend time with each other. They pray with each other, and they play ball together. They do things together, and the culture of getting along and cooperation is here. And that leadership succession still goes on. So those probies, they understand the team environment. When they come here, they're not on their own. They're riding for the brand, yeah, but they're riding for something bigger. And that's all built in about leadership, and, money and grants and how people perform. And we share equipments. We do a lot of things. It's never about me. It's always about us. God bless you all. That's all this old man has to say.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have any other comments?
That's all, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Chief, for your presentation. Thank you for all the fire leadership that we have here and continuing to work together on our current fire. And certainly we will continue to support and prepare for the next one.
I think we had a few comments from Dr. Claussen.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, for hearing me. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Rusing, for inviting me, and welcome to Chief DeRay. I agree 100% with what he said, and that starts with personal responsibility and homeowner responsibility. And I think the contribution I could make to the council on this anniversary of the Indian Fire is my perspective on how a private homeowner can be empowered to cooperate with all of these different agencies. And as Mike King said and Chief DeRay said, this did not start out of just nothing. It was all preparatory before the 2002 fire. And I have been a physician here since 1985, and it's totally out of my realm to know anything about firefighting. But I was introduced to the concept of FireWise back in 1989 when our fire chief back then, Ron Prince, started community enlightenment, and these were evening sessions down in the basement of this council building and also Prescott National Forest building over on Cortez. This is the original 1991 first edition wildland urban interface done by Western Fire Chief Associations, and I think there might be a 7th edition right now. And here we go. The first one on the committee is Ron Prince, Fire Chief, City of Prescott, Arizona. So this is where it started. This started with proactive fire chiefs, and since then, we've had other very good fire chiefs, Darrell Willis, Dwayne Steinbrink. But when I first heard about this, I realized that I live on the very south end of town. I live in a meets and bounds county parcel, so I don't have any jurisdiction other than I'm just a homeowner. So what can I do to empower myself? And once I went to some meetings with Powwick, which is now Yavapai Firewise, it's a little easier to remember. But I would encourage the council to do everything they can to support that Yavapai Firewise and educate the public to be responsible on their own. But the public needs your help. The public doesn't know what to do. They have short-term memories, and they need to be able to leverage. My first leverage was when the Prescott National Forest was doing the brush crush on the south end of town. This was 1 year before the Indian fire. So I thought, hey, what a great idea. I'm going to go out and talk to the private contractor and ask him if he can do Firewise on my property, which I'd been trying to do myself and with some landscaping people, but it was just too big a task, 8 acres. So having leveraged off of that agency, the Prescott National Forest, I was able to do a defensible space, and the fire actually came to our back doorstep. But before that, 2 years, Prescott Fire Department was meeting with people in the county. I don't live in Mountain Club, but I'm outside of Mountain Club. Mountain Club's in the county, but they wanted to have neighborhood meetings and identify who has a paved road, who has any water source. Does somebody have a pool? I happen to have a pool. So when this fire came 2 years later, it was no accident that the Prescott Fire Department knew they could get a 75,000-pound truck up my steep driveway right on the edge of the forest. So, what I would do is to encourage you to continue to support some of these education entities. And since the Indian fire, there's been a continuation of efforts. Chief Darrell Willis and Steinbrink with the Prescott Hotshots, but more importantly, Prescott Fire Department and their fuels mitigation has done work on meets and bounds parcels just in the last 2 years, including a visit to the parcels on the forest side, not in Mountain Club, but working off forestry grants and able to do mitigation efforts. So this is what's going on even to this day to continue to strengthen that area. But we have so many different jurisdictions, with the Prescott National Forest, city limits, county, areas of the county still around us, and state lands. I encourage you to help individual citizens to be empowered, and whether that's brush day, making a free day in the county. I think we have these last 2 months still where you can bring your brush. We also have ordinances within the county, Ordinance 558.
Claussen, can you please conclude?
Oh, sure. So that would be my encouragement to you. To do what you can.
Appreciate your comments very much.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
our item to
Thank you.
consider. Thank you very much. All right, let's move on to our last item here. We've got, 30 minutes to go? So this will be a presentation from Yavapai County Public Works regarding a proposed roundabout at Commerce and Pioneer Parkway.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
If I'm wrong, you look like Dan Cherry.
That is correct.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. As mentioned, I am Dan Cherry. I'm the Public Works Director. I'll give these folks a moment here to clear out.
Don't take it personal.
I won't. I certainly will not. I've waited this long. It's not a problem to wait another 30 seconds. So.
Nothing like the county to clear the room.
All right. Again, I'm Dan Cherry, the Public Works Director with Yavapai County. I have with me my Assistant Director, Roger McCormick, and of course, as already been recognized, Supervisor Craig Brown. And this project that we are discussing today is located within his supervisory district on the north side of Prescott. So, Roger, wouldn't mind kicking us off on the slideshow? I'm going to assume that everybody has seen a copy of this as part of your packets, so I may do some paraphrasing, and I recognize it's been a long afternoon for everybody already. So what I'm here asking for today is for the city to consider a partnership with the county on the construction of an improvement that is located at the intersection of Pioneer Parkway and Commerce Drive. This is just north of the Pioneer Park facility on one of our most significant regional roads in the area, Pioneer Parkway. This is funded by the county with our regional road program, and that regional road program was initially instituted in the mid-90s. Created by a half-cent sales tax that the county adopted by the Board of Supervisors. And at the time, a large portion of that sales tax went towards regional road planning, design, and construction. Since then, the portion of that sales tax has been adjusted by the board up and down during the recession. They really cut it back to try to make ends meet with regards to other things, but currently we're getting about 40% of that sales tax goes into the regional road program. We have used that funding for a lot of things, but most importantly, partnerships with your agency, with the town of Prescott Valley, with ADOT on a very common basis. This is what was used to realign Willow Creek Road in the vicinity of the airport. This is what was used to originally build Pioneer Parkway, and all that was done with partnerships with local agencies. All right, next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the specific need here. As I'm sure you are aware, this intersection has had a new leg put off of it to the north that serves the Hidden Hills subdivision, and ultimately is intended, based on the information that we've seen, to be extended beyond that and access the Deep Well Ranch subdivision. The intersection itself experiences fairly high speeds for eastbound traffic on Pioneer Parkway. It's a downhill run coming into it. People love to go ripping down that. The road was originally designed with I believe a 60 or 65 mile an hour design speed, and people are very comfortable driving it at high speeds, so that is the nature of it at this time. As Commerce Drive intersection has continued to become more popular with respect not only to the park itself, but for access to the grocery store that's out there, the Fry's, and other facilities such as the car dealerships, it has grown and grown as far as the traffic volumes that go through that intersection. So we do have accidents in the accident history out there. I am, knock on wood, happy to say we have had no fatalities yet, but we all feel that there have been some significant enough accidents that I just believe it's a matter of time if we don't move towards some better solution at this point. We have considered a traffic signal out there. It is not ideal, partly due to the speeds that people are driving. It'll cause people to probably speed up even more to make it through potential red lights, and the other issues that come with a signal that I will get to here momentarily. Roger? This is just an exhibit. I'm not going to go through these figures here, but you can see basically what the speeds are we're seeing relative to the posted speed limits on both Commerce Drive and Pioneer Parkway. They are significantly higher than posted. The county has done some speed details out there in the past. We have also permanently mounted a radar feedback sign for the downhill run, but I can tell you that its effectiveness has waned as of late, and so we feel the need to move forward towards with something more valuable in the ultimate term. So here's just an exhibit of the existing intersection. This was taken from the traffic impact analysis that was provided for the Hidden Hills, the language here on the left here. But you can see we've had the new leg added to the northwest, if you will, in this exhibit. The county has made some improvements to this intersection over the years. If you are familiar with it, you'll notice that the right turn through, free through right, coming from eastbound Pioneer Parkway onto southbound Commerce has been shifted dramatically off to the right. That is due to accident history in the past that was caused by right turning traffic, causing line of sight issues, and people were pulling out in front of cars coming down that hill and resulting in some issues. This has helped to solve this, but it hasn't completely eliminated those T-bone accidents. So why are we considering a roundabout over a traffic signal? For those familiar with roundabouts, they are quite expensive. They involve quite a bit of infrastructure changes, not just to the intersection itself, but also on the approaches to it. There's concrete involved, which is never cheap, but ultimately it results in a far safer intersection. And you have lower speeds, you have what accidents you do experience are more glancing fender bender type of accidents rather than T-bones at high speeds. The steeper grades that will come into this intersection, not only from Pioneer Parkway to the west of the intersection, but also now from the north down the Hidden Hills direction, will mean people will be speeding up to this. There is currently a stop condition for Commerce on both directions. However, we have had people just kind of roll up and roll through stop conditions and create accidents that we're want to avoid. The other reason we're considering this is we see this as the ultimate solution out here, and with what costs we've experienced as of late as far as inflation goes, we'd like to do this once. We'd like to spend the money now, do this the right way, not have the developer put in some turn lanes, not have the developer a phase or two from now put in a signal, and then 5-10 years from now ripping all that infrastructure out and putting in what the county sees as an appropriate solution for this intersection. The other thing is with a signal intersection, we still would have some level of service issues out here. And most importantly, for turning movements, we see level of service C and D in the short term, even with a signal, and we'd like to avoid those. And by upgrading this all to a roundabout at this point, we can maintain a level of service that is high, not only for now, but into the future. We did review at the request of the City of Prescott Public Works Department, the traffic impact analysis that came in for the Hidden Hills subdivision. It had some recommendations in it. As mentioned, they were going to put in some turn lanes and acceleration and deceleration lanes to stave off the need for a traffic signal at this time. The part of the issues with that is it doesn't provide good pedestrian crossing, even with a signal that intersection is so darn wide that it really would create some delays for people if, say, a pedestrian wants to cross and traffic is waiting for that. So in the future, as this continues and Deepwell Ranch develops, if it's still a signal, we see a real breakdown of that intersection when it comes to not only vehicular but also pedestrian crossing through that. This is a little excerpt from the master plan for Deepwell Ranch. It does show the ultimate connection from the Deepwell area and James Roundabout ultimately over to the Commerce Drive intersection. As you're well aware, the long-term plans to develop the Deepwell Ranch area with housing will only put further pressure on this intersection, and we'd like to keep it fairly well future-proofed at this point. So current project status, the county just completed the design on this. We started it about 10 months ago, if I had to guess. It is ready to go out to bid. In fact, we advertised it this past Sunday for bids for construction. We feel as part of this conversation, it would be of value for everybody to have some real numbers at hand rather than just what an engineer is making a guesstimate at currently. I have some optimism associated with the costs on this. Even in these dark times with high inflation and high asphalt costs and everything, because the proximity of this project relative to our suppliers, honestly, is nearly ideal. We think we can take advantage of that and would like to see some of our local contractors bid on this project and get this thing built here in time before the Hidden Hills subdivision traffic really starts to kick up. With that in mind, assuming this council is interested in partnering on this, our intent is to see construction in the latter half of this year, starting around July and finishing up by the end of the calendar year. And just so that I don't leave you without some kind of idea as to what this is ultimately going to look like, this is an exhibit we had our consultant develop that did the design project. You can see the shifting of the center of that roundabout is slightly to the north, taking advantage of what right-of-way we have out there, not only associated with Pioneer Parkway, but also with Commerce Drive. This is fully surrounded by BLM land, so we did not want to go through the acquisition process for getting more land from BLM. That can be a time-consuming and painful process, if you know what I mean, in dealing with our federal partners. But we do think it'll fit here, and it gets us the appropriate deflection for the approaches on this to really slow traffic down and make it for a safe situation. And lastly, costs. The county the design contract was $265,000. We have put in our budget proposal for this coming fiscal year $2.7 million that will go towards completing the design and constructing this. The current project estimate is $3.7 million for construction on this, and we are requesting this city council consider a contribution of $1 million, figuring that is about a quarter of this project cost, and that is reflected by the 1/4 of the intersection, legs to this intersection. We anticipate and have had discussions with your public works staff about the possibility of development agreements with your developers, as well as possibly impact fee funding coming into this. But I don't want to make assumptions on that. I certainly think that is something that you all can have those conversations on. So with that, I am more than happy to take any questions.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my question is, a lot of the projects that we've put out to bid recently, in fact, we have an item later on our voting session in the next 20 minutes that the engineering estimate was, creeped up by almost $1 million. And so I'm curious, you say you're optimistic about it, but I guess I'm curious, do you have any, on other items that the county has put out to bid, and given that this is dealing with, concrete, as you mentioned, in an era of tightening supply chain, are you going to come back and ask for more money?
All right, that's an excellent question. So let me first respond to the first part of it with regards to bid costs. We bid out projects regularly as well at the county. We have had our consultant take a good hard look at their cost estimate and make some adjustments to it based on recent asphalt costs that we're seeing on bids and concrete costs. So we have already kind of bumped it up a little bit in anticipation of reflecting what we're seeing on our bid tabulations now. In regards to asking for more, you have my word that I wouldn't do that. My opinion is that if the city is willing to play ball with this, the county will take the risk of covering overages on this bid. We will be the agency bidding it out. But on the other hand, if it comes in low and we get lucky on it, I see that being to the advantage of the county.
Sure.
And so just asking a flat rate would be for a contribution would be my hope. So.
Okay, thank you.
And we can certainly develop an IGA with the city that will reflect that.
If you didn't proceed with a roundabout, what would a signal cost be for that intersection?
That's an excellent question, Mayor. I can remember the days when a traffic signal was $250,000, but I think those days are long gone. We do not do very many traffic signals at the county. In fact, the two that we have here in the area at Willow Creek Road and Pioneer Parkway and Williamson Valley Road at Pioneer Parkway, which I know you're very familiar with, are actually both operated by the city under an agreement. And so I would honestly venture a guess in the $1 million range, but it may be higher than that even. There's been discussions about SIMPO applying for a Highway Safety Improvement Program grant for a potential signal at Gale Gardner and Fair Street, and I believe the cost for that is significantly higher than that even, but it may involve more infrastructure improvements that I'm not aware of. So I'm a little out of my league in that regard because I don't have a good bid tabulation for a signal these days.
Well, I can tell you that I drive that area very frequently. And one of my primary concerns is at night. We had a joint law enforcement activity out in that area. We had one violator doing 92 miles an hour down that hill. So when you put in a roundabout, and I've, of course, navigated a lot of them myself, they're usually on a very flat topography. And even in those conditions, you get accidents, you get people driving over the roundabout, you get trucks doing that too. Coming down that hill going eastbound with the high speeds that you've even documented, being able to navigate that roundabout at night, I think makes it very dangerous in my estimation, unless you're planning on some substantial illumination of that roundabout.
So roundabouts are required to have illumination. That is part of the design standard for them. So there will be illumination. It will be downward facing to be in compliance with dark sky ordinance, but it will have illumination on it for the approaches. The other thing we're doing as part of the design is we actually are raising the downhill side of it on Pioneer Parkway so that it is more of a flat roundabout, if you will. So it'll come down and the roundabout itself will not be on a tilt, but rather than flat, and then it'll drop downward again as you move east away from the roundabout. Similarly for the approaches from Commerce Drive. So it will help some of those situations. We are required to do advanced warning of roundabouts. You're absolutely right in regards to accidents. They do occur at roundabouts. People fall asleep, they are impaired, they have trouble navigating these, but in general terms, those tend to be single car accidents for people that are not navigating a roundabout for a variety of reasons that is not due to the design of the road, but rather their own inability to control their vehicle.
What's the traffic volume that you have right now at that intersection?
So currently, traffic volumes for the westbound on Pioneer Parkway are about 7,700 vehicles per day, and that's eastbound, 7,700 vehicles per day. Westbound is about 8,100. for traffic that currently heads south on Commerce and north on Commerce. It totals about 4,500 vehicles per day.
That's a lot on Commerce.
It's significant, but it's not as high as some of the cities, in major intersections. And we anticipate that will continue to grow.
And I noticed your estimate here for Phase 1 of Hidden Hills is at 144, and they've already asked to increase that to 171. And I don't believe that they were suggesting that that road through Phase 1 would be a connector road and add substantially more traffic from potentially Deepwell Ranch through that Hidden Hills and then connecting with Commerce Drive. That's an additional concern. Councilman Tenney.
Dan, thanks for your presentation. Appreciate it. Several things come to my mind. I'll just be very brief on each of them. One is that you mentioned that we might be looking at a situation where we work with the developer on some of the funding for this. That seems to make a lot of sense to me, given the context of what the mayor just shared. Secondly, I have some concerns about asking our Prescott taxpayers to both pay county taxes to fund this and then additionally Prescott taxes to fund this as well. So we'd probably need to talk some more about what that would look like and if that's, to what extent that's reasonable. But I appreciate the thought of cost sharing, and I know that works both ways. There's been times in the past where the city of Prescott was interested in something. In fact, we discussed something just recently where the county is working with us to lower the cost of Prescott for something that's advantageous to us. So I'm certainly aware of and familiar with that. We were talking just recently about this very intersection and traffic ingress and egress and how important public safety is with regards to that. This seems to address that to some extent, and so in that respect, I'm a little bit more in favor of it. And again, the cost sharing piece and what role Prescott should play and how our taxpayers might be double taxed, so to speak, on that is something that's in the back of my mind, so we want to do some more talking about that. But in general, I'm certainly in favor of this. I'm not going to rely on my intuition about what's safest. I'm going to rely on your engineering degrees about what's safest and take that one to the bank. Thanks.
Certainly so, and if I may, the benefit of the Regional Roads Program, while it is an additional tax that is collected on, a sales tax is collected from all people in this county, is it creates a pot of money that can be utilized for the city can leverage the county leverages the city. In a partnership, we combine that pot of money, we build something that we may not be able to afford otherwise, and maybe make something better than we can afford otherwise. So, to me, it's something where the city can take advantage of something that the county is offering here and put it to their benefit, because it's city boundary on the north side, it's city boundary on the south side of this intersection, and the corridor it goes through is just a county maintained road. But I guarantee you have a lot of people using that intersection in your incorporated community limits, and I think they will see just the same benefit that any county resident would see.
Well, there's no question of that, and I appreciate that perspective. I remember when Commerce Drive was extended to connect up there, I don't remember ever seeing a car go on there, and I thought to myself at the time, why did they even build this road? And then to hear you say 4,500 cars a day travel along that, it's clear that the traffic is increasing, and it's mostly not just residents of the county. It's residents of the county and the city, and both.
The Pioneer Park has really become a destination of many sorts as well in the city. It's one of the crown jewels of the city, and people go there every weekend. They flood in there for a variety of things. I mean, we've been meeting with Joe Baines, to talk about hosting campers there this weekend because of the Crooks Fire going on, trying to give people a place to have an outlet for camping that want to attend the Whiskey Off-Road events. And, better access is not hurting anyone out there. More efficient access, safer access. $1 million, we fought enough lawsuits and fatalities in our careers. I know you guys see the same thing here. We want to avoid an accident that is going to take someone's life out there, and I feel that it's just a matter of time. So we're very much of the opinion that this is the right thing to do. It's the right time to do it. And so I appreciate your insight. That's very valuable to hear.
Mayor Pro Tem, you have a question.
Yes. Thank you very much for your presentation and bringing this to our attention. This roundabout is, it's in a growth corridor, and that area is going to grow, and Pioneer Park itself, which is a wonderful asset, is going to have increased use. And I just know from personal experience, making a left turn onto Pioneer Parkway from Pioneer Park can be a challenge sometimes, and it's only going to get busier. And one thing we need to address is Stringfield Ranch is going in further west, and that's going to bring increased traffic. So I think we need to seriously address this and look forward and just say, in 25 years, will we look back and say this was a terrible idea and we didn't need it? And I don't think we're going to do that.
Thank you.
Councilman Shishka.
Thank you, Mayor. In thinking about what we have that already that would be comparable to this, I think about Prescott Lakes Parkway coming down off the hill, going down to the Justice Center. Would that topographically be about the same?
I don't think the topography at Pioneer Parkway in Commerce is quite as steep as the run down from the Storm Ranch access or the Sundog extension, if you will. I look at that and I see that wall of hill there, and I wonder at times how that's going to play out. But obviously, we're looking at that in a different study with SIMPO at this point. So.
Okay, well, it sounds like we've got, I'm not sure what the traffic count is. Ian could probably tell us, but at Prescott Lakes Parkway, and I think that I'd be quite comfortable with a roundabout there, even with future traffic possibilities.
Yeah, and it's designed as a two-lane roundabout, so there's room to grow. We want to accommodate what traffic is existing on Pioneer Parkway. So, to me, we put a lot of thought into it. Our consultant ran traffic models using the regional transportation plan model, and we feel that this will, last well into the future as far as level of service and safety.
Thank you.
Thanks. Do you have any public comment?
We do, Mayor. Barbara Jacobson.
Hi, I think my only concern is how much money the city over the last decade or so has put into roundabouts already. And I don't know what hidden development, if it's in the city or the county or wherever. I love the names, hidden. It's not hidden from anybody. But I think, if it's in the county and that's all county property out there, the county needs to be responsible for what they want to do. I think the city has done about enough. And I think, as someone mentioned, the taxpayers maybe feel that they've done enough in terms of hugely expensive roundabouts. That's all.
I don't know if you have any comments, response to that, but
I think I've already provided some response to that, but if you'd like me to expand on it, I'd be more than happy to.
Go ahead.
Again, the value in this improvement to the residents of the city, I think, are equal to those of the residents of the county. The county is bringing forth $3 million on this. I can tell you that if I got a grant that was 75% paid for, and I kicked in a 25% match, I'd take that all day long, $0.25. And to me, I think if it's a matter of funding, I completely understand that. But the benefit of it, I believe, is fairly clear to everybody involved, and has been supported by our engineer design team as well as the regional transportation plan. So,
very good. Well, we appreciate your presentation, and I think at this point we'll adjourn the study session and reconvene here. Let's say 5 minutes after 3. You get 10 minutes off.
Thank you. Thank you all, and you have my contact information at the end of the presentation. So if any questions come up, just let me know. I'm happy to provide my thoughts. So,
thanks. All right, the study session is adjourned.
You didn't give